Turning our attention to that crash, that fatal crash in St. Anne that happened last evening. The police have confirmed that 2 people were killed in a 4-vehicle crash along the Dunsborough Main Road in St. Anne on Wednesday evening. Dead are 55-year-old Christopher White, a vendor, and 42-year-old Corrine Browning of Thompson Pan District in St. Catherine. A 22-month-old girl was injured in the incident and remains in hospital this morning. The crash, which involved 4 vehicles, including a Range Rover and a Nissan AD wagon, happened in the vicinity of Pearly Beach. For an update and to give us some more insight into what happened, we're being joined by Superintendent Winchester Watson of the Constabulary's Public Safety and Traffic Enforcement Branch, PSTEP. Superintendent, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, madam, and your listeners.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Nationwide this morning. Superintendent Watson, could you give us some insight into what happened last evening?
Well, good morning again. And based on information from the investigators, somewhere about 8:20 p.m., a fatal collision occurred along the Dunsborough Main Road in the vicinity of Pearly Beach. It involved 4 vehicles. A Range Rover, which was traveling from the Outer direction towards Miami Bay. For some reasons unknown, up to this time, failed to keep left. Hence, veered to the right of the roadway. It collided with a underfit that was traveling in the opposite direction. It also had impact with a Nissan AD wagon, as well as a Toyota Wish. So far, the driver of the Nissan AD wagon, as well as 2 occupants, are confirmed dead. Other persons were injured and are still in hospital. The investigation is still ongoing, and as soon as we have other information, we definitely will share it with the media.
Just for clarity, Superintendent Watson, we were reporting that there were 2 fatalities and that a 22-month girl was injured and is in hospital. But you just mentioned that the driver and 2 passengers in that AD wagon died. So is it that you're confirming that the 22-month-old girl has also passed?
No, I've not gotten the name of the 22-month-old, but I was told that there are 2 other persons that are in the vehicle.
In the AD wagon?
Yes, sir.
So how many people have died?
It is what I'm getting is the driver as well as 2. So it's 3 persons from the AD wagon.
Okay, so you're not sure of who the 3rd person is yet who has passed?
No, I'm not. I'm not sure.
And any information on the passengers of the other vehicle, the drivers and passengers of the other vehicles?
You are coming in slow. I'm not hearing that clearly, but I'm yet to get additional information. I'm working on it. I'm in communication with the investigator from the St. Anne Division. But as soon as we have additional information, he'll definitely be informed.
Appreciate it, Superintendent Winchester Watson. He's from the Constabulary's Public Safety and Traffic Enforcement Branch, PSTEP. So, sir, we stay on top of things with you as soon as you get the next update.
You are welcome, sir. Not a problem.
Good. Appreciate it.
Turning our attention now to the matter of productivity. Anthropologist Professor Don Robotham has called for a reset on literacy, emphasizing its role in addressing low productivity. Writing in the Sunday Gleaner on March 17, Professor Robotham argued that if Jamaica increases productivity but continues to produce the very same profile of low value added goods and services, the economy will not develop, incomes will not rise, and the tax base will not expand. The principal of Mona Campus, that's the UWI Mona Campus, Professor Denzel Williams, wrote a piece for the Gleaner on March 29, and he argued that productivity gains will be realized when the country goes beyond the literacy issue. Professor Williams says that there's a need for higher order skills beyond literacy and numeracy, such as critical thinking and problem solving, to move Jamaica's economy up the global value chain.
To continue the discussion about the path to higher levels of productivity, we are joined by the former president of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, Howard Mitchell, and principal of the Mona Campus, principal of the University of the West Indies Mona Campus, Professor Denzel Williams. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, all.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Nationwide this morning. Let's begin with you, Professor Williams. Just that overview, what do you make of the current productivity landscape in Jamaica?
Oh, I'm
we
hearing
just
that,
lost
Williams.
Professor Williams.
Yes, so let's start with Howard Mitchell then. Sir?
Hi, Tom. Saeed, how are you? Hi,
good.
Donna.
Good morning.
Your view on the current productivity landscape in Jamaica?
I think it's unchallengeable that our productivity is probably one of the lowest, or is the lowest in the region, or one of the lowest in the region. It's been declining since I can remember, and the fact is that you're not going to get real growth unless we do something about it. Productivity, and it's not just that we're a low-wage economy. That is so, but it is also, as both gentlemen have said, that one, there is a problem of literacy and understanding, and two, there is the issue of the analytic capacity of our citizenry. But also, I'd like to propose that doesn't go the whole step in understanding the problem. That, as Professor Williams has stated, it is critical that we develop tertiary level education to improve the analytic capacity, and also that we do research and development into more complex production and more complex jobs and more complex activities. However, the fact is that even if you do that, you cannot do it in isolation. It has to be done in a context of smart collaboration between the private sector and the government, and a policy framework that incentivizes business and entrepreneurs to go to these areas of complex production and to get involved in them. Because the fact is that water finds its own level, and no businessman is going to go and deliberately take on within the current bureaucratic and policy, lack of policy framework that we have in Jamaica, is going to go on and take on complex manufacturing production where he can buy and sell, import goods and buy and sell them. We need policies that incentivize our business people. The money flows towards areas that create these opportunities, because if you don't do that, then what you'll find, and I hope Professor Williams will be on, but what you'll find is that we get people who are literate, they go through the tertiary system, and as universities suffering from now and for the country, you get a brain drain because they go to other areas in the world to apply their trade, and we lose them. So unless you can get Mona Institute of Applied Sciences and SRC and those people, and develop the University of the West Indies research and capacities within a framework of policy incentivization of money, then I think we won't be completing the task.
After the break, certainly, Professor Williams, want your response to what Sir Howard Mitchell just said. Said quite a bit there, but specifically want to hear from you as well as it relates to critical thinking, problem solving. How do we move Jamaica up the global value chain after the break? We're on the front page speaking with Howard Mitchell and Professor Williams, former president of the PSOJ and principal of the UWI Mona, respectively. Professor Williams, you there?
Hi, very good morning, Saeed Turner, and very good morning to your listeners.
Thank you so
and
much.
My very distinguished friend, Mr. Howard Mitchell.
Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. Want to get an understanding from you, though, Professor, as it relates to going beyond the literacy issue to address, as you put it, critical thinking and problem solving to move us up the global value chain. And you heard just now what your good friend, as you call him, Howard Mitchell, just said as it relates to these issues. What's your take on it?
Right. So I think that Howard is onto something really, really good, as he correctly contextualized it, calling for an improvement in literacy, numeracy, and beyond that, calling for an expansion of tertiary graduates, is really part of the puzzle. There's a bigger part that really needs to now come into focus, and that is how we are now twinning what we're doing towards the developmental agenda for Jamaica. And so, really and truly, if you notice in my own piece, what I did was to call for an industrial policy to actually guide that kind of developmental framework that we're talking about. At one point, we talk about industrial policy as a bad word, in neoliberal circles. Today, what we're talking about is industrial policy to do exactly what Howard is talking about, which is coordinating the pieces. So what we need is the private sector to be on board. We need all of the non-governmental sector, etc., to say how we're going to now use the resources from the human capital produced by the university in a coordinated way to develop the country and improve our productivity. But importantly, is how we're going to incentivize, for example, the production that Mr. Mitchell talks about. We have to do it in such a way that capital can see that there is going to be a positive return on their investment and a return that is actually responsible for the risk that they're taking as well. And so what we have to do is to have the coordination among the various players to make sure that is happening. The university has to play its role, private sector has to play its role, policymakers have to play their role, and capital will have to play their role.
And in terms of the rules, Professor Williams, there's always been this argument that in the basket of things that will push productivity along, you have, really poor managers or people who are resistant to change and upskilling and all of that. Where is that in the line of things that contributes to productivity?
Now, we can't ignore the work of Ken Carter in all of this discussion. You remember Ken Carter, who wrote a piece some years ago, a few decades ago, about why workers don't work, yeah? And basically, there are some very, very basic principles that he outlined. For example, respect, organization, things to do with how work is structured and stuff like that. All of these elements come to play in terms of getting the worker to now starting to think differently and starting to produce more. So the managerial aspect is one, but we also have to look at the technological aspect, the tools that we're also giving the workers to work with in order to enhance their productivity. And that is why you have to now have the capital class making investment in technologies that are going to actually enhance the way that people work. So it's complementing all the way people work, not really replacing them. And that is why we ask for things like investment in artificial intelligence technologies. We ask for investment in the human capital that is now going to allow them to seamlessly use these kinds of technologies, etc. So the truth is that puzzle is not just a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. You have to put all of the various elements in there. And importantly, the managerial class will have to also make sure that they organize work in a way that the workers can feel comfortable, that the workers can actually produce more. Give them the right working space, making sure that they understand their objectives, making sure that they are being measured, making sure that they are being evaluated, and making sure that they have the resources to work.
But a part of this issue, one would say, Mr. Mitchell, is that you're incentivizing on one end, giving the tools, but the very incentivization for the worker itself is the remuneration. Yeah, how do we balance that? How do we incentivize the very workers now to use the tools to not only further the interests of productivity, but to further their own self-interest?
Well, let me respond to that in two ways. One, I just want to underscore what Professor Williams was saying about the work environment and what Ken Carter, the work that Ken Carter did. In the broader context, you can't have productivity in an environment. You can't separate culture from productivity. You cannot have productivity in an environment where there is hostility, where there's tension, where there's constant division. And this is one of the things that I've been preaching for a little while about values and attitudes, that all of this is of a piece in our society, because we have a society that is tearing itself apart with tensions that we have not addressed. And in addition to that, we have a society that is unfocused as to what it is really about. We have an identity crisis, so that we have great productivity in the areas of entertainment, for instance. Right? I mean, but that does not necessarily, and I know this is controversial, that does not necessarily match with worker ethic. That you can't have 3 days of partying during the week and still have people who are productive having come home at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. All of those things have to be taken into account. Now, to address the specific issue of compensation, I believe that we really, as the private sector, have to look at performance metrics, and it again is of a piece with the analytical abilities and the use of data in our society. And it's not just our workers who are lacking in analytic capacity. It is our managers and our business people. And the fact is, I've been a manufacturer and a distributor of goods, and I can tell you that unless you have a policy framework and a structure that would allow me as a manufacturer to take home every year after tax or before tax rather something more than 8% of profit when I can buy and sell under 30 or 40%. You are not going to get me to engage in some of these uplifts of work complexity and product complexity that we're speaking about. So this requires national attention, smart collaboration, pulling together all of the actors on this particular in the economy, and coming up with a policy framework that addresses the issue of work culture, workplace culture, that addresses the issue of performance incentivization, the education for work that we need in the society, and the kind of cultural incentivization and direction that a government and a state must give to its people. Right. And we're not having that.
I heard you wanted to come in there, Professor.
No, that's exactly what I wanted to take off from there, because that issue of setting the policy framework is so critical, because the truth is that if you're going to have this reorientation of the mind, if you're going to have this incentivization, etc., what you need is a public policy that is going to drive that kind of thinking. And so what we're seeing here, as I indicated before, is that all of these need to be done in the broader context of a national industrial policy that says exactly where do we want to go as a country, what are the things that are priorities for us, how we're going to address them, what are the resources that we're going to pull together to make sure that we address these things. And public policy is what is going to incentivize those kinds of issues. So that is why you really need, if you're going to address this productivity issue, you need a kind of a joined-up approach, not a kind of a siloed approach to say the managerial class is doing their thing, and then you have the capital class doing their thing, and then you have the bureaucratic class doing their thing. You don't really need it like that. What you need is a coordinated approach, and that is going to happen through an industrial policy.
And a part of that industrial policy, I imagine, would lend itself to access to education, as I see you put it in your piece there, Professor. Right. You say it's not just access, not just the access to high quality, not just the mere access to the institutions, but the access to high quality post-secondary institutions. Could you expound on that? I mean, when you look at it, we have UWI, UTech, there's a Heart NSTA. Yeah. You know, what more needs to be done in that regard?
Well, what you need, Saeed Turner, is that you really don't just need people to go to a university or go to a post-secondary institution. You need them to go to an institution that is creating value. So really and truly, in this day and age, what you find is that persons may just want to get a piece of certificate and then say, I have a degree or I have a particular certification, without having the ability to apply and also the analytical skills behind it. What you really need is institutions that are focused on quality so that they can turn out graduates that are now making these kinds of contributions. And so you have to look at the quality aspect of the institution. What is it that they're teaching? Who is in the classroom teaching it? What kind of research that they're putting out there? Stuff like that. So you need to ensure that it's not just like, as we would say in Jamaica, a kind of a degree mill.
But Professor,
certification to people.
Professor, isn't there already some mechanism in place to ensure that, you know, the universities and these post-secondary institutions meet a particular standard in delivering their courses?
Well, you have the University Council of Jamaica. That is very, very useful. And then you have Jamaica, JTech, Jamaica Education. I don't remember the exact name for it, that Dr. Black heads as well. But the idea is that not all institutions actually pass those standards. And therefore, we have to be very vigilant to make sure that all institutions that are now, especially those that are benefiting from taxpayers' money, that they meet the standards that are set by the University Council and the Jamaica Tertiary Education Council and all of those accreditation bodies. But also importantly, we need to ensure that they are able to gain global recognition as well through their processes. So it's not just locally from the University Council of Jamaica, but globally, because remember now, our graduates are not always going to remain here, so their degree has to be very portable.
And a final one before we let you go, gentlemen, to you, Howard Mitchell. We've been having this conversation, but another important aspect or factor in this whole matter of productivity we've heard spoken about time on time is the matter of infrastructure, improving the infrastructure. You hear all the time people saying the amount of time people spend in traffic or, trying to get to work when they could be at work being productive, but they're stuck in traffic. How important is a factor of improving the infrastructure?
That underscores the need for collaboration, and I keep using the term smart collaboration. We can't keep having this emphasis on politics over policy. So we have to have some consensus on what the structural framework for the society looks like, and this is one of them. Creating an amenity for our workers who are then educated for work and for value. And with respect to these institutions that grade the universities and certify them, it's not just about standards, it's also about fitness for purpose of the academic qualification that you get. I mean, it makes no sense us producing people who have certificates in language ability in French if we are not putting it to some use. They would be frustrated.
Yes.
So the emphasis has to be on a holistic approach to what the society is going to extract for itself in terms of value and benefit, and to enable our citizens to achieve their highest human value. And that the social infrastructure, the cultural infrastructure, we have to look at those things and put them in a context that we're driving in the same direction. That's policy, and that's something that we successive administrations in our political system have been weak at.
Howard Mitchell, former president of the PSOG, and Professor Denzel Williams, principal of the UWI Mona campus. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
You turn our eyes now to the new service standards for automated banking machines. The South St. Catherine MP Fitz Jackson is welcoming the new service standards for ABM imposed on deposit-taking institutions. The standards were published on Tuesday by the Bank of Jamaica, and we are joined now by the Governor of the Bank of Jamaica, Sir Richard Biles. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Nationwide this morning. Sir Biles, certainly have to ask you, coming right off the bat, why are there no monetary sanctions for the deposit-taking institutions if they don't follow and stay attuned to this standard that's been released?
Yeah, well, a monetary sanction would require legislation. That is a law that says you must achieve certain standards or else. We don't have the law, and getting a law passed is quite a process in Jamaica. And generally, countries throughout the world, laws take time to get passed. So what we have relied on instead is moral suasion. And how we have gone about it is that we have met with the banks, and they are seized with the challenge that so many Jamaicans face. They know, they feel it, they hear it every day, and they're ashamed of it. So in discussions with them, we arrived at a consensus of what standards are appropriate and achievable, what they think Jamaican public should receive from them. And those are the standards that we are putting out there. When we do have the law, which will take a little while, we will put the monetary sanctions behind it.
So the intention of the BOJ then, through legislation, is to have the sanctions ultimately?
Absolutely.
So in the meantime, while we wait on the legislation that will carry those monetary sanctions, you also mentioned in the standards that non-adherence may give rise to supervisory concerns around safety and soundness with the attendant supervisory consequences. And people have been asking, what are those supervisory consequences?
Well, if you are a deposit-taking institution, a bank, and your supervisor is not pleased with you, that's a bit of a challenge for you. Because there are many issues that we have to work together on. And if I have a very positive view of your service and what you're trying to do, then I will, that positive view will rub off on how I deal with you in many other ways. And if I have a negative view, similarly, that will rub off on how I deal with you in other ways. So I think it's in the best interest of the banks to be in good standing in the eyes of the central bank and to achieve the standards that the bank asks you to achieve, especially when we have sat down with the banks and we have agreed that these are the standards that are appropriate.
And as it relates to the concern that the no fees for unsuccessful transactions not being in the standards, why was that not placed in there?
Tell the truth, that's a detail that I'm not totally aware of. I would have to check on that. Let me follow up on that.
Okay.
So you weren't in the consultative process, Mr. Biles?
Not in the details.
But as it relates though to...
Is this something that you at this time would consider adding to the standards as well? Persons go to the ABMs, they're about to do a transaction, the ABM fails for some reason, malfunctions.
Oh, yes.
The transaction was not completed, but they're charged.
No. I agree with you entirely. And that's an oversight on my part.
So you're saying this morning that this is something that the BOJ would consider adding to the standards? I will
take that up with them.
Okay. Fitz Jackson, he was on this program yesterday, the MP for South St. Catherine, and he was saying that the standards and the enforcement aspect of it, he likened it to something like a bookkeeping, because you have these reports and then you publish it. But what really holds the banks to account? It's you name and shame them, but what if they do nothing?
No, well, I don't think a bank will do nothing. Not only will the public not put up with it, but we won't put up with it. And we, as I say, if a central bank, your supervisor, frowns on you because you don't perform in a way that we agree, then that's not a good thing. Until we have the law, and I don't have any control over getting a law passed. That's Parliament, and that's all of the process that leads up to Parliament, which is very involved.
Yeah.
If you ever know all the committees and the people that have to comment on a piece of legislation, simple as it may be, your mind will be blown. It takes months, even years, to get Parliament, to get legislation to Parliament and to get Parliament to approve it. I have no control over that. I have a situation which we must deal with now. I am totally sympathetic with the public on this matter, and I believe that the banks, based on our discussions with them, are very understanding of the challenges, and they don't want their good name to be blemished. So I believe we have a good chance of raising the standards. Maybe if I had financial penalties, they may even be sharper. But until I have that, we're doing our best.
Governor, I have to ask you though, because many persons have been complaining about their monies disappearing. It's in an account in the bank, and it's no longer there. And they're always being told, oh, you were scammed, or it's phishing, and all of that. When they're saying sometimes they don't even get an email to have been phished. Yeah, is the BOJ considering anything as it relates to how the banks ought to deal with the consumers and the customers in these certain instances?
Yeah, there are procedures. From the bank's point of view, they have to determine whether a customer has genuinely been robbed or whether this is part of a scam. That's a challenge that they face, and they have to take a little time to work that out. Now, that's a whole different set of standards that we would have to be looking at. Different from ABM machines and the service that they deliver. So you'd have to allow me to be able to look more closely on that. Let me just give you a little background to Bank of Jamaica. We've spent the last 25 years building up our prudential supervision. That means that we are looking at banks in terms of having plenty good, strong capital and processes that will make them stay efficient and stay profitable. That's what we have focused on for the last 25 years. And the proof of the pudding is that we have had no bank failures in the last 25 years. Can't say that for the United States. Can't say that for many other countries in the world. Remember 2008? Many major banks failed. Just in the pandemic, some banks failed right in our northern neighbors, the United States. So Jamaica has done well in terms of prudential management. What we need to do now is to turn our attention more to the business of market conduct and customer protection. And that's what the Twin Peaks legislation that is being prepared, even as we speak now, is going to deal with. It is going to say to the FSC, you have to become a professional at international standards in the matter of market conduct and customer protection for everybody that is dealing with the financial sector, whether it is a bank, a securities dealer, an insurance company, pension funds. You have to be the expert there. You must be the watchdog. And then the Bank of Jamaica will become the prudential watchdog for everybody in the financial sector. So there'll be a separation. One institution deal with prudential oversight and the other deal with market conduct and customer protection. When we get there, I promise you, the landscape is going to look quite different to now. You will have two very focused, very professional supervisors looking at the financial sector.
Now, on the matter of going back to the standards for a bit, Governor Biles, just to get some clarity, is it that a bank that wants to, make adjustments in its fees, they have to write to the BOJ first, indicating that they want to make adjustments in their fees, and that must be justified, and then you will permit that. But if not, they can't go ahead and increase those fees or adjust those fees?
Correct. Same thing with paying dividends. When banks want to pay dividends, they advise the bank that they want to. We look at the justification for it, and if it is okay, we say yes. If it doesn't look good to us, we say no, and we enter into discussions with them.
So in the case now of a bank where you're giving the banks about 9 months now to implement all of these standards, what if they come to you sometime after and say, boy, to implement all of these things, it cost us a pretty penny, and that's one of the justifications given for why they want to increase fees just after? What would be your response?
Well, let me tell you, ABM machines are very sophisticated machines, and they're expensive. Some of them, especially intelligent ones, cost up to $500,000 US. And for them to be viable, you have to have good throughput. That is, many people are using it, the uptime is good, and the fees are appropriate. So, like everything in life, the cost of doing business rises, but it doesn't rise dramatically, hopefully, and it doesn't rise regularly and frequently. So that is what we'll be looking for. I know that there are instances and there are concerns that the fees that are charged at ABMs are subsidized to some extent, But we will look at that when that issue arises, because I know that that is a sensitive issue for the public.
Mm-hmm. 9 months, you think that's enough time for them to implement all of what you've presented as the standards?
This is an agreement with the banks, and we don't mean that it is going to take 9 months for you to have 95% of your ABMs working all the time, and 95% of them have cash in them all the time. We expect that to happen like now and in the next couple of weeks. But there are certain other standards that will take a little while, like making the ABM machine vestibules available to wheelchairs, that kind of stuff, which takes a little time because there are so many locations around. That will take a little bit more time. And there are some of the technological supervision techniques to know, for example, that a rural ABM is out of cash, for you to know that instantly. That is a piece of software and hardware that you have to put into the machine to be able to be alerted to that instantly. Those are the things that we're saying may take the 9 months, but not that they are available 95% of the times and that they have cash in them 95% of the time.
And how does BOJ now ensure that these are working the 95% of the time?
We get reports, and the reports are generated by the machines themselves.
Cannot be manipulated by...
Well, I don't know, but I presume not. I mean, if I found that a bank was manipulating data that they're sending to the central bank, that would be a serious issue.
And those reports, the reports on how many ABMs were working in a month and the time to replenish cash and all of that, that report will also be made available to the public?
Absolutely. We will publish it every month.
Okay, and finally, Governor, before you go, so if I constantly use one ABM and for an entire day, I go there in the morning, it's not working, I go back there in the evening, it's still not working, can I call the BOG and say, this machine has not been working for almost 24 hours? Does that raise the alarm?
And you have my number too, so you can text me and tell me.
All right, Governor Miles. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Richard Miles, the Governor of the Bank of Jamaica. Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Thank you, too.
Good.